I love this country. I love being Australian. I love the freedom. I love being fair and giving a fair go. I love the spirit of the land and what we stand for. But something changed.
Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
I started this film because I needed to do something about the gut feeling I had about Iraq and the world that just wasn't making sense. But making this film connected us with much deeper values, and a more timeless conversation emerged with people I met about our future for humanity and the planet. Flashback to February 2003. A giant wave starting in Australia surged around the world for peace. A sea of heartfelt faces of every colour and creed gathered together as one. And it got bigger and bigger and bigger.
Welcome to Gadigal land, Aboriginal land.
This is the biggest protest ever seen in this nation of ours.
We've never made a film before, but something got Wendy and I to pick up cameras and just go.
Say for virtually anything.
Your action for peace may be the most important thing you will do during the whole of your...
I didn't know at the time, but I was embarking on a journey that would change my life.
Yeah,
My brother,
my
my true brother. Why am I a little brother? Because I'm a whitey. I ended up in places I never thought I'd go.
It's a one red blood.
Meeting David Gulpilil opened my heart. He explained the invasion story of this land. I realised how important it is to see things through others' eyes and to really listen to what others have to say.
What we're fighting for here is the conscience of our world.
For a start, Australian democracy has been mortally wounded.
You cannot bomb democracy into existence.
Organised mass murder is not the civilised way to solve our problems.
Unfortunately, justice and equity are being willfully replaced by the abuse of power.
Mr. Bush, Mr. Howard, with what conscience will you sleep at night?
How can this many people be wrong?
There were some big concerns here to face up to. I felt I needed to talk to people about what was really going on and why. So I set off to see an expert in strategic defence studies, Professor Bob O'Neill, who the locals call the Professor of War.
We're getting onto the edge of a slippery slope. I think we have to look at Iraq as simply the curtain raiser to a much bigger potential conflict in the Middle East.
In the United States, two groups very close to President Bush both wanted war. And on the one hand, you've had the extreme fundamentalist Protestant evangelists who regarded Islam as a threat to Christianity. Also the neoconservatives who have a very hardline, I think very extreme right-wing view of the world, were also in favor of demonstrating American power. He believed they were right. He looked at the world in simple terms, and he thought he was spreading democracy. What he was really doing was promoting the war on terror, rather than helping to overcome the war on terror. And he was also promoting a set of circumstances in which Muslims around the world would believe that the West, America particularly, is an enemy of Islam.
They've so altered the accepted norms of international law and international engagement
It was only ever permissible under international law to attack another country if you had a legitimate fear or threat of them attacking you. We've gone one step further here, and unfortunately going one step further, whatever the merits of the issue in isolation, it sets a terrible precedent for conduct between nations.
When political leaders start to say we can't defend our own principles by maintaining the rule of law, leaders who say that no longer deserve to lead. Iraq had no links with Al-Qaeda, and now it's the biggest terrorist factory in the entire world.
We need all the major countries to realise how much is at stake if we just continue to undermine the United Nations and relegate it.
I was fortunate to spend some time with British Muslim spokesperson Dr. Anas Al-Tikriti.
You know, if we were to consider once again the Charter of the United Nations to save humanity, mankind, from the scourge of war, everything that we've done over the past 4 or 5 years has been against that. Everything.
The United States has meanwhile consolidated its role as the biggest arms dealer, with sales in the year 2000 worth some 20 billion, more than half of the world's global arms trade figure.
Today is a modern day. We live by money, you know, and money and power.
Some people want to see the business of war thriving, and it is thriving in a big bad way. That aid amount is paltry, but the defense budgets are huge.
It's really hard to shut down the war machine. You know, they're very powerful, they're very wealthy, they're insidious, they're in everything. You know, they're like a cancer that's really spread to all segments of society. And people who run our countries, which are really the war profiteers, and that's who you're fighting the war for, to line somebody else's pocket.
This is not a mere political agenda. It has, at the heart of it, the issue of greed. It's very simple. Some people may say even naive, but that is it. It's the issue of greed, whether it be financial, whether it be for strategic interests, whether it be for power, whether it be, it's greed. And we have to take that into account when we come to assess the issue of war, occupation and invasion. Think about it.
I was thinking about it. My brain was overloaded with it, but I didn't know the half of it.
One day you're sailing along, saying, oh, the problem will look after itself. The next day the problem's got too hard to reverse. And global warming is one of those problems that we know has that potential. We should identify the indigenous peoples right around this planet. They were able to live with the planet for an eon of time. Our civilization can't. Quite clearly we're going to destroy it unless we take on some other different way of thinking about it.
The native people, Aboriginal here, the Native Americans, where many of these tribes didn't even have in their mind the idea of property. The idea of money didn't exist.
It's in here. On a gundang orian. Gundang mariane. Kangara garjama aljane.
Arakaida bush medicine. I'm got a tree. I'm not la bottle.
We give some to our neighbors and to our relatives and to our cousins until there's no more left, and then that's our way of mutual respect.
That's what happens with Aboriginal people. They don't see the dollar sign like the white people do.
Handed down to us from our grandfathers to our grandfathers to our grandfathers.
Let's go right back, and it's here. It's come from here.
The wealth is the connections with the land, with my ancestors, with my family. So I know deep down that whatever will happen to me in forever, the tribe will take care of me, and I will take care of the tribe. So the mutual investment, the capital was social capital of relationship. And many of us today cannot buy that.
If we don't act now, within a matter of decades, many species on this planet will cease to exist. And where the number comes up for Homo sapiens, this human animal, we don't know. It becomes more and more daunting to see how megacities of 20, 30, 40, 50 million can survive with falling food resources, more farmland taken up, global warming, with the collapse of the sea fisheries, with the massive diversion of energy and into building arms instead of into fostering human interests.
Human beings can't, as a species, afford to be violent anymore. And if we don't turn all our energies to getting out of the oil addiction and all these destructive and extractive industries that are just totally unsustainable, we're all going down the gurgler.
90% of the world economy is oil-based, but oil will soon end.
So there is no turning back.
There is no turning back.
With huge arms deals, oil running out and global warming going on, what more do we have to think about?
The US State Department has recently estimated that there are some 44 plus states that are capable of having nuclear weapons. Something like a form of unpredictable anarchy has begun to develop.
Everyone dying, everyone shooting amongst themselves. There's a lot of wars going on. It's a killing field in this world. Sooner or later, Australia come and revolutions become here. It'll come fire, like a bushfire will come. Because I can hear it here in my brains. My heart is telling me.
The weaponisation of space. It is the new war. It is about controlling space, making sure that China doesn't make gains there. It's about, again, about America's hegemony.
Needs a stipendiary steward's inquiry, I think, to find out what really is going on here. And a few of the jockeys need to be checked, and actually the trainers as well.
We are living in times where we have the first ever global dominant power, an imperium which is unusual because it speaks the language of democracy. And as we know, there is no global army or global strategy for dealing decisively with the new forms of violence that are now settling on the whole world. Violence is, I think, the arch enemy of democracy as we know it.
With so many people saying no to war, how could the invasion go ahead? How can we look back on Iraq and explain it?
I go to Iraq today and I tell them that I've come to from Britain, and they say, "You're an evil country." And I know that the British people aren't an evil people. The Australian people are not an evil people. The American people even are not an evil people. But we are governed by people who use evil politics.
People keep on asking me, why did the US go so wrongly on WMD in Iraq? And the answer is really quite simple, and that is the US policy had got far ahead of the intelligence. Because the statements of President Bush had to be supported, the intelligence agencies found the information to back up those statements. So Howard went all the way with the US. He ignored Australian intelligence. I saw the Australian assessment that was given to Mr. Howard. In fact, I was asked to comment on it. They said, and I'll read this out, "There is no known offensive research and development since 1991, no known biological weapons production since 1991, and no known biological weapons testing or evaluation since 1991. As I say in my book, we went to war on a lie.
The reasons for this war have nothing to do with Iraq being a security threat. They have everything to do with American strategic interests.
Right.
And oil is one dimension.
Right.
Israel is another dimension. Establishing their authority in the Middle East, that's a dimension.